Alright, what's going on everyone? Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here, welcome in. We're going to be talking about PulseChain and more specifically the PLS supply that we can be expecting once mainnet actually goes live. There have been a lot of numbers thrown around as well as some by myself on my Twitter where I speculate, you know what, I think initial PLS supply will be between 200 and 270 trillion units. Now keep in mind, it was late when I uploaded this, and I actually thought about it a little more, read some comments saying you're a little off, and I think I am actually. So we're gonna do the math here live, and you guys can confirm, let me know if I'm off like you did in that one, and yeah, we're gonna get into the PLS supply. So first of all, let's look at the sacrifice address and remember that this value here, $16.732 billion sitting in that address, it feels crazy just saying it, is not actually the amount of US dollars that's going to be counted. Now let me explain. As many of you are aware, the US dollar value that's actually going to be counted is that which was at the time of sacrifice. So if I recall correctly, about $700 million entered the sacrifice address between days 1 and 18, or between days 1 and 19 truly, but on day 19 in kind of the second half of the day or so, it was day 19 where we saw some whales, some hex whales specifically coming in and adding another 110 billion hex, which at the time, again, keyword at the time, was about $14 billion. So I think it's safe to assume that of this 16.7 billion, we're actually only counting about $14.7 billion. Now, if your calculations are different, feel free to let me know why. Give me your reasoning in the comments and your figures and all that. But for the sake of this video and this calculation, we're going to be running with these numbers of 14.7 billion doll hairs. So what do we do with that? Well, let's start with 14,700 million, right? So that much money. Now remember that we had, first of all, a time bonding curve. So the time bonding curve took us from 10,000 points per dollar down to 5,000 points per dollar. And you can flip it, right? You can think about it as it went from $1 for 10,000 points to almost $2 for 10,000 points. And so what can we do with that? Well, if we take the average of the time bonding curve, I actually did this here on this spreadsheet, then we get a 1.28, right? So that means that there's sort of a, right, instead of multiplying this by 10,000, right, because that would imply just kind of an average curve of 1, we're going to multiply it by 10,000 over 1.28. So is that right? Hold on. So 14.7 billion US dollars. Now, how many points per US dollar? Anywhere from 5 to 10,000. Right, so it's times 10,000 divided by 1.28. And that should take care of our time bonding curve if I'm not mistaken, right? So let's stick with that. And now I'll move on to the volume bonding curve. So if we recall what the time bonding curve, or excuse me, what the volume bonding curve looks like, it was anywhere from a 1 to a 2.5x, right? Now, if you think about it, let's do another calculator here. So if you think about it, then for the last 3 days, you had a flat 1.75x bonus, right? However, for the first 16 days, there was kind of a battle going on. So the average there is going to be a little tricky, and we're actually going to come up with a rough number, but bear with me here. So what we can do is say, we can kind of pick a range, right? So let's assume the average volume multiplier for days 1 through 16 was just 1. And that'll give us kind of a lower bound, right? A lower bound. So 16 days at 1, which is 16, plus what is it? 16 plus 1.75 3 times, and divide all that by 19 days. And you get a 1.11 average. So that's kind of a lower bound of what our average volume multiplier might be. Now, what about an upper bound? Well, if you think about it, between 1 and 2.5, it's impossible for your 2.5 to be your average, and it's actually probably much lower than that. It's probably like 1.75 or maybe even less during the first 16 days. So then what you would do there instead is actually, instead of 1 times 16, it's 2.5 times 16. So you're gonna get something like 45.25 over 19, so 2.38, right? So you're looking at between like a 1.11 and a 1.38. Let's just divide that by 2, kind of gives an average. So 1.75, right? That was kind of actually a roundabout way of saying 1.75x is your average. Well, not necessarily your average. I'm not trying to confuse you guys, but let's just assume there's an average 1.75x volume bonus, meaning that on top of these coins, we're going to have this many coins, right? So there's your 1.75x. And then also remember that the automated market maker fixer bot is going to print an extra 2.5%. And then there is also a Genesis address, which will be allowed to mint an extra 1% of the supply. So times 1.01. So there you go. You're looking at approximately a 208 trillion PLS supply. So approximately this many units. The reason the tweet I put out yesterday kind of overestimated this is because I wasn't dividing by this 1.28 number, right? I was saying a flat 10,000 points per US dollar, but obviously there were, with the time curve, it went from that and actually went down to almost 5,000 points per US dollar on day 19. So you have to factor all of that in. So if you look at my tweet, I said something like between 200 and 270 trillion units. I do think it will be closer to 200 trillion. And if you think about it, based on this kind of rough calculation, it could be even less than 200 trillion, right? Because let's get rid of this 1.75x. And what if we assume that the average volume multiplier, like the average stack, was more so a little guy, right? More so like a 1.3x. So if we multiply by 1.3, then we're looking at 150 trillion units. So I actually want to revoke, kind of like amend the statement, right? And give you a new updated range with this insight that I'd forgotten to include the time curve, which is kind of important. So sorry about that. But I do think now, based on this calculation, that the PLS supply could be between 150 trillion to 200 trillion units. So yeah, I might have overestimated here on this tweet. So I'll probably update this and let you guys know, like actually I did the math and I think it's between 150 trillion to 200 trillion units, which it's a decent amount, right? It's a decent amount. So that's that. And okay, I want to cover something that I see so many comments on this, man. And it's a little frustrating, but I realized like I should just chill and explain. Because a lot of you guys are saying this supply is too high and it'll limit upside potential in price. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm so beyond that kind of thinking. Not trying to sound condescending, but that it almost had me think like, why are people assuming that? And I had to think a little bit about it to try to understand why people think that. And I think it's because people think that market cap is some sort of metric that can't go beyond a certain number, or it can't flip Bitcoin, or just silly theses like that. And so you ask yourself, like, or these people, they ask themselves if Pulse price will be suppressed because it has such a high initial valuation of like $14 billion. Now, I want to point this out and make very, very, very clear that the sacrifice USD value, that $14.7 billion, is not market cap. It's just not. It's just not market cap. And so if you think that market cap needs to hit a certain number for you to break even, what you're actually saying is price needs to hit a certain number for you to break even, because whatever cost basis you get your coins at, you want, if you're going to sell, right, then you want the price to be higher than your cost basis. It's really simple. So when people say like, oh, the upside potential is limited because this much money was entered, like, let me get this straight. I want to clear things up for you guys. That the only real thing that affects price, and correct me if you think I'm wrong in the comments, I'll gladly take your input and hear your take, but the only thing that really matters for price is liquidity, right? Your liquidity depth across all your pairs. So PLS, PUSDC, PLS, PLS PETH or EPLS ETH, right? Whatever network you're on. It's the thickness of the liquidity across all of its pairs and the subsequent buy pressure from the free market, right? So if you have a very illiquid pool to begin with, and a little guy puts in $1,000, like that can pump the price a lot, right? And it can give you these really big, kind of ridiculous looking numbers for market cap, which people in crypto might be like, whoa, that's like too high. It's, flipping Bitcoin, what's going on? But I mean, at the end of the day, guys, like market cap is just like a made up number, right? It's just a multiplication of your last traded value for the asset times the circulating supply. So, if one dude gets filled at a certain price level for $10 worth of volume, like market cap went there for a bit. Did that mean there was that much in liquidity for people to be able to pull out? Hell no, that's not how markets work, man. Like market cap and liquidity, way different. And liquidity is what actually affects price, right? Market cap just responds to what price is, right? Market cap is just a calculation that takes in two inputs. What are those inputs? Those inputs are the sort of the independent variables that you actually care about, which is your price and sure your supply. But price is what actually matters, right? So assuming a lot of the supply is just not touched, like 90 to 95% isn't sold because there were some, you could argue, some benevolent whales that came in on the last day to kind of suck up the supply, and assuming, right, whales don't need to sell because they're well off, that's the kind of thesis there, then you can assume that if they hold the price up for the most part, the actual circulating supply from non-mega whales, non-OA hands, for example, would be something closer to like 5% of this. So maybe like 7 to 10 trillion, something like that. So yeah, I mean, we'll see. But I definitely wanted to clear that up, that the only thing that matters for price and for you potentially to break even is, or the only thing that matters is price, right? Truly. The only thing that matters for price is liquidity depth and subsequent buy pressure. So you obviously want, reasonable liquidity so people can get out without too much slippage, so people can get in without too much slippage. But you also don't want to care about that too much at first so that price can appreciate. This thing has me like absolutely hypnotized. I need to like exit from here. But yeah, guys, that is pretty much all I wanted to say on the PLS supply, that I think 150 to 2 trillion sounds reasonable. I wanted to clear up that liquidity, depth, and subsequent buy pressure is all that matters for price, and market cap is just, don't even think about it, man. Seriously, like there's very little to zero situations where you thinking about market cap is actually a good idea. So that's just my take on things, all right? I put up a poll, just kind of end off the video. I put up a poll on YouTube as well as Twitter saying which direction do you think ETH goes once EAP 1559 is live. That's coin burning. And a little bit people, 10% or less, said moon, less than 10%. About 26% said sideways, and about 64% said wrecked. So just a dump, right? If we look at the YouTube stats, they're pretty similar. Instead of, instead of 10, 27, 64, you have like 15, 26, 59. So a little more people on the moon here, a little less people on choosing rect, and we have kind of the same amount of people saying sideways. I actually replied to all of your comments on here. I haven't even seen these. All right, I'm gonna get to these comments, y'all. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Go ahead and follow on Twitter if you haven't already. You guys have been blowing up my Twitter. I respect, guys, mad respect. You guys have been blowing this shit up. Like, good on you. Thank you for that, as well as the subs. Like, you guys have been crushing it. So thank you for being here. Definitely subscribe if it's your first time here. Welcome in. Yeah, I'll catch you in a future video. Leave your comments, likes, all that good stuff. Share the video if you think your friend might benefit from seeing this. So again, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in tomorrow's video.